Hi, I'm Dr. Andrew Chappell from ProPrep Coaching, and today I'm going to speak to you about rest periods and how you can manipulate rest periods to get the absolute most out of your training sessions and actually the most out of your strength and your hypertrophy training or your muscular endurance training, depending on whatever your goals are. Now, a lot of these techniques and things that I'm going to talk about are things which I've utilized myself down the years, both as an athlete, but also as a coach, working with different individuals to help them get ready for the sports that they're taking part in, whether it's strongman, powerlifting, bodybuilding, or if it's triathlon, rugby, swimming, or sprinting. So these are things that we've utilized in our coaching company, ProPrep Coaching. And guys, if you do enjoy this stuff, be sure to check out the rest of my videos. And also, if these are strategies and things like that you think are useful, then I can ask you, please, at the end of the video, please do check out the other stuff and get in touch if you like this content and see if I'm maybe the right person to work with you at ProPrep Coaching. Okay, without any further ado, let's get into this. So this is a presentation on rest periods for resistance training primarily. This is my business here, ProPrep Coaching, and you can check us out at www.proprepcoaching.com. Okay, so primarily I'm interested in bodybuilding and championship bodybuilding and getting athletes ready for events. And what I will say is that we always try to take an evidence-based approach towards our training. I'm a doctor of nutrition. I've got a sport and exercise science background and a nutrition background, and I've published multiple papers on the subject of bodybuilding, as well as getting in shape for lots of events myself down the years. I am a pro bodybuilder as well, with my partner Steph Noble here as well, who is a pro bodybuilder as well. And if you're interested, here's one of my recent papers on the topic of bodybuilding and athletes getting ready for it. Now, what I will say is that the strategies which you can utilize for high performance sport should be the same strategies that you're trying to utilize to get your athletes in shape for bodybuilding events or strength training or strongman, whatever it is that you're going to go ahead and do. And it wasn't until I was 2 or 3 years deep into my degree and in my first bodybuilding seasons that I sort of realised that I should have been paying a little bit more attention to the sport and exercise science component of it rather than the myth and the lore which surrounds bodybuilding. Now, using these strategies, these are just some of the clients that I've helped get in shape for bodybuilding events in recent years, and you can see there are a number of athletes on this page here. So we've got athletes across multiple divisions and athletes of multiple ages and ethnicities as well, from athletes who are beginners to athletes who are competing for pro cards and competing at world championships and the highest level as well. So we do work with athletes across the board, different age ranges, different categories, and we really do specialise in bodybuilding. So if you are interested in these strategies and what we do, then again, as I said, right at the end of the video, please do get in touch with us. Okay, so let's get into this. Well, what are you going to learn? Well, what we're going to talk about here really is rest and how long you should rest between sets, why you might want to manipulate the rest, and the science of rest as well. So this is what we're going to talk about in this particular video. Okay, so first off the bat, I think this is a very good graphic because it sort of encapsulates all the things that many people on here would be interested to learn. And this is a nice little table, so you can see here that for reps between 1 to 5 or 85 to 100% of your 1 rep max, that's really this sort of strength training component, the Olympic weightlifting power component. You're really looking at longer rest periods between sets because the goal is strength and power. There is some hypertrophy associated with this type of training, there's no doubt about that, but you're really looking at longer rest periods, and the goal of it is to really let your phosphates regenerate after this type of exercise and your nervous system to recover so that you can then go again and perform the exercise once again. So it's much longer rest, and all the strongman training that I've done down the years and different people that I've trained with, some people will take as long as 7, 8 and even 9 minutes between sets when it's a very heavy lift. That obviously brings with it its own issues in terms of recovery and injury and getting cold and so on and staying focused. But it's not uncommon to see people rest for 5 or 6 minutes between sets. But this is a nice little baseline idea in terms of the rest. Thereafter that, 6 to 8 reps. So that's you're moving towards, again, more strength-based style training or power building type training. And when you're doing this type of training, you get a much larger buildup of lactic acid when you're doing this. Rest for these types of exercises 1 to 2 minutes, but you could go quite easily anything up to 3 minutes for this type of exercise from there. After that, we're looking at 9 to 15 reps, and you're really into the more bodybuilding style rep ranges from there. So you're getting much more hypertrophy going off the back of this. You're going to get that much bigger pump which takes place when you're doing this type of exercise. You still do have some strength. There is still a large neurological component associated with this type of training, and you will see athletes who are extremely strong in these rep ranges. But really, you're looking at much lighter loads, so 65 to 75% of your 1 rep max, and much shorter rest periods as well. So 45 seconds to 90 seconds, that causes a buildup of lactic acid. But you might see some people going up to 2 minutes rest in this type of training as well. Finally, the last thing I'm going to mention here is muscle endurance type training. This is really where you're doing much higher reps, training with much lower loads. Body weight loads are not uncommon, and you're really taxing your metabolic systems with this type of training, utilizing a lot of glucose. And actually, some of these exercise sessions, they might turn out to be really aerobic in nature as well. So we have to bear that in mind as well. What you're going to see with this is circuit type training perhaps, and you're really looking at anything between 20 to even 60 seconds rest from there. So that's your basic sort of premise around rest and what we look to try and do. There are a few caveats though. So for example, if you're doing these large compound movements, typically you're taking more rest in a session than if you're doing these sort of style of isolation movements. Likewise, machines, typically you're taking more rest than if you're doing free weights. However, again, there are exceptions to the rule. If you're training your legs, these are very large muscle groups, and they often require more rest compared to the smaller ones. So a leg press, for example, requires more rest than a bicep curl, even though the one is a free weight and it's an isolation compared to the other one being a machine. And again, it is a compound. So there are nuances in this type of rest table that we can interpret as well. Okay. Now, many of you will be thinking, well, what does this all come down to at the end of the day? How do we know to rest this long? And it comes down to our energy systems at the end of the day. So when you're doing that power type exercise, those 1 to 5 repetition type exercises, the sets are typically not very long. So you're really not using large amounts of glucose. You're not breaking down glucose into pyruvic acid. What you're really doing is you're using up your body's ATP stores, its creatine stores, and the set might only last something around about, say, 15 to 20 seconds. So there's a little bit of glycolysis taking place, so breakdown of carbohydrates for energy. But everything's really dependent on something called ATP, which is this molecule here, which when broken in half, you get something called ADP, and it's that separation between the phosphate bonds which leads to the creation of energy. Now, when you rest, what your body will do is it will regenerate its own ATP stores, and it can do this in association with phosphate creatine stored within the muscle. And after around about 5 minutes, your body's stores of ATP along with creatine should be back to sort of baseline levels thereafter that. So really, with strength training type exercises, so long as you rest long enough between the sets before that cumulative fatigue sets in, you really should never be missing sets. When you move on to lactic acid type building up exercise, like the bodybuilding though, what we're really trying to do though is we're trying to create that metabolic stress. So we want to build up the lactic acid and we want to break down a lot of glucose within our muscle. So we produce a lot of pyruvic acid, and if there's not any oxygen present, then we get that lactic acid buildup. So you can see here that depending on how long you do the activity for and at a high intensity, then what you see is you get a more reliance on the lactic acid energy systems from here. And then finally, exercise that is very prolonged, you start using much more of your body's aerobic energy system. That means utilizing oxygen and burning fatty acids for energy. So it's very, very different from here. But rest periods really do depend on what it is you're trying to do with the training, e.g. strength, muscular endurance, or power training, and that really does tax different energy systems. And really, as I said before, provided you rest long enough, you won't get that fatigue until the muscle damage accumulates, unless that is, of course, your goal. Now, hopefully that all makes sense, and if it doesn't, hopefully it'll make a little bit more sense when I move on to the next slide for you here. But hypertrophy, so the process of building muscle mass, is dependent on lots of different things. So what you're looking to try and really do is you're trying to create a large amount of lactic acid buildup. You're trying to cause your muscles' creatine phosphate stores to be emptied. You're trying to cause a large buildup of these things called H plus ions being released within the muscle mass. You're trying to create swelling within the area and the pooling of muscle mass. You're trying to create radical oxygen species, and you do all of these things through the combination of the sort of short rest periods, the high reps, there's lots of continuous muscular contractions, taking muscles to failure, getting a large amount of blood flow to an area, so that's why blood flow restriction is very effective. And this all results in this sort of hormonal releases, the hypoxic state, and then you get your muscle hypertrophy, or you get the increasing vascularization, or if it's sort of more aerobic type exercise, you get more mitochondria, which are responsible for delivering more muscle, or rather more oxygen to a cell. It's complicated. So you've got that combination of, this says up here, metabolic stress, and that's all the stuff that we just talked about there. So utilizing all your energy stores, muscle tension at the same time, so actually the load that gets put on top of that, and then that results in your hypertrophy from there. And then if we combine muscle hypertrophy, then you get more muscle strength along with the neurological factors that take place as well at the same time. So this is what those shorter rest periods actually end up inducing. They end up inducing that muscle hypertrophy because of the metabolic stress in combination with the loads that you're putting on it as well. Now, strength adaptations are different. So you do get larger muscles. Larger muscles do result in ability to move greater loads. But one of the things that you're trying to do with power and strength type training is you're trying to allow your body to become more efficient at firing pathways. So we get a signal from the brain. This is the nerve here, which flows all the way to the individual sarcomere within a muscle fiber. These individual nerves, they're responsible for controlling motor units. So that's a bundle of muscle fibers or sarcomeres. And then from there, what you're trying to do is you're trying to get more efficient at contracting these muscle fibers in sequence. You're also trying to get more consistent and better at contracting larger amounts of these in one single bout. So the training is very different, and the rest period reflects that as well. So you're not only looking to just recover in terms of metabolically between the sets for your strength training, but also recover in terms of your central nervous system between sets as well. So hopefully that all makes sense to you, and that's as I promised, the last sort of slide we've got on any science on this particular topic. Now, things that we need to be considering in terms of the rest are that you might want to manipulate the rest between your sets to facilitate progress and overreaching. So even though I've given you that scheme before of, say, 3 minutes rest for a very heavy set, sometimes you might want to just do 2 minute rest because you want to cause more fatigue. Or maybe you want to have even shorter rest periods in that. Maybe you want to superset compounds from there, so you get even more rest, and increase that neurological and that metabolic stress on the body overall, just by manipulating that there. Now, what you have to bear in mind is that might hamper your ability to perform at a high level between the session, but that might be your goal. The other thing is you have to consider is that might hamper your ability to recover between sessions if we're training like that. However, again, that might be the goal that we're trying to achieve with this type of training. So as long as we know what we're doing, we can manipulate it. Other things we need to consider is if we want to get stronger, then it might be a good idea to manipulate the rest and to have longer periods of rest between the sets. So maybe you're trying to get stronger in that 10 rep range. You're used to always doing 1 minute to 2 minutes rest. Maybe if you take 3 or 4 minutes rest, then you're able to get that heavier weight lifted in the 10 rep range, and that might be more beneficial for you overall in that particular block of training. And that's a useful thing we have to consider for power building. Now, one thing that should be considered is how these things affect your ability to recover and how these things affect your ability to cope with injuries. So just bear in mind, if you do a whole load of skipping, for example, like this chap's doing here, and then you go and try and do some complex multi-joint exercises, your ability to perform and execute those movements effectively might be compromised. So just bear that in mind. So their propensity for injury is going to get higher and higher and higher once you start manipulating rest like this period. So this is where a lot of the guys I see down the years in strongman, they end up getting hurt, and it's usually by the third or fourth set, not the first or second set, that they get the injury because they're fatigued, they're tired. And then you see the same thing when you take part in the competitions, and when you've got to lift like a large stone or something like that, it's quite a complex task. If it's a natural stone rather than one of these Atlas stones, they've maybe never lifted it before, and their cognition's been stressed at the same time, this is a game where you can potentially get an injury. So just things to consider when it comes to manipulating rest as well. In terms of injury prevention, there are a lot of things you can do. So straps, wraps, knee wraps, belts, knee sleeves, all these things are going to help you in terms of preventing injuries. Just be conscious of the fact, though, that the aim should be to build strength in your joints, and that you don't always need the equipment. But again, it depends what you're doing. You might have to weigh up the risk depending on the particular session that you're doing as well. In terms of rest itself, manipulate rest depending on the set and the exercise. So you shouldn't stay the same rest period all the way through the session. You might want to get more of a pump at the end of the session. You might want to be training for strength at the start of the session, or you might want to do it completely in reverse. Also, don't be afraid to experiment. As long as you're safe, then you can manipulate things. And then finally, another couple of things which are worth bearing in mind is there's often unintended consequences of manipulating rest. If you're manipulating your rest and you're focused on things with something like a stopwatch, what tends to happen is you tend to be a little bit more focused in your session. So you are a bit more focused and you get more better sessions. You don't tend to miss lifts as much if you're taking the appropriate rest. If you're going too soon, and that's often a problem people suffer with, they're taking 2 minutes rest when you should be taking 3 minutes rest, you'll maybe find you'll get more consistency in terms of the sets as well. Also, you might find that you just get through the sessions quicker, and then you can get back home, you can have a rest a little bit better, and you can rest a little bit more between sessions. And then finally, if you have got a training partner, just bear it in mind, depending on what exercises and what you're doing and what you can hope to achieve. And as long as you're straight with each other in terms of how long you want to rest between the sets, then usually you can get through sessions without any compromise with rest periods. Just maybe sometimes try and incorporate things like the I go, you go principle, which basically means that once I've finished, it's your turn, and then once I've finished, it's your turn. So you're not really resting between the sets and you're getting good intensity across the board. Okay, so finally, the rest periods should depend on your set goals. Strength training requires more rest compared to endurance-based training. Shorter rest periods will tax your metabolism more than the longer ones. There are multiple factors, though, that contribute to hypertrophy, so we should train in all different ways. You should definitely consider the potential for injury when you consider rest periods. So again, too short rest periods when it's complex movements can lead to this, so just bear that in mind. And then you can manipulate your rest, and that can allow you to get faster, more intense and focused sessions. Okay, folks, I hope you have enjoyed this. As I say, if you are interested in my work and what I do in the coaching with my athletes, then please do get in touch. We always take an evidence-based approach with all of our athletes, and I directed you towards some athletes earlier on, so please do get in touch if you're interested in bodybuilding and pursuing these sort of goals. And then finally, please be sure to check out the WNBF UK. I am the president of this organisation with my other half, if you're interested in natural bodybuilding and natural bodybuilding events. And then finally, be sure to check out the rest of our articles on www.ProPrepCoaching, and check us out on the Instagram as well at ProPrepCoaching, Fueled by Scott Soates and WNBF UK. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for listening. And as always, if you have any questions for me, then be sure to pop them in an email to me, get in touch, or leave them in the comments section below. All right. Thank you.